Welcome to the Project Exodus podcast series on OFM podcasts. Join us weekly as we explore critical topics on addiction and recovery through insightful discussions, heartfelt interviews, and practical Q&A sessions with members of the Project Exodus team and community. Project Exodus is dedicated to making expert recovery interventions accessible to all communities. Through this podcast series, our hope is that understanding and support for those on the path to recovery will be enhanced. Whether you're personally recovering, supporting someone else, or just curious, join us in building a community of awareness, compassion, and hope.
Cool. Welcome, everybody, to our Project Exodus podcast series. Today, we are discussing the journey of a supporter, and I've got Kelly and Sade here with us today. They've just taken the time to come through and just share their personal story. So thank you, guys. Thank you for coming through.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. So obviously, for many of us, we understand that, for example, if I'm struggling with an addiction, going to a recovery group and getting involved in that makes sense. But you guys are supporters. You haven't actually necessarily had a substance or addiction or something like that. And why did you find it necessary to join a recovery group and to get into recovery?
Do you want to go first? Yeah, so with me, it took me a while with my husband he went to rehab, and then he did an outpatient program, and then there's a whole, 90 meetings in 90 days kind of thing. So he went through his own recovery process, and for me it was I was in a space where I went, okay, when he gets fixed and comes home, then everything will be okay.
Yeah.
You kind of think there's nothing wrong with me. He's the one that kind of needs the help,
I'm a saint.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've given up so much.
I've done so much for this person.
I know, and I've basically saved him.
Where's my medal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still haven't got my medal, but anyway. So, but then he seems to be on this really nice journey, and he's doing really well. And I'm still sitting there full of resentment, still angry, still, wanting him to almost suffer, and bitter from things that he'd put me through.
Yeah.
And then, only after that do I go, actually, maybe I need some help. And, so I only got on my own recovery journey about a year after he'd started his. And then when you go to a group and you hear these things like codependency, you're like, and enabling and all of these things, and take responsibility for what you've done, part of the journey, which isn't really nice because we think we're saints and then we're not. And then that gives us our own kind of freedom. So I felt, for me personally, going on a recovery journey and taking responsibility for my part of things helped me forgive him, because it wasn't all on him anymore. I had my own parts. It was easier to move forward.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that you kind of were still holding on to stuff. Just to give some context, what sort of things went down? What's all the stuff that you had to forgive him for?
So my husband has been in recovery for 11 years now, but we got married when I was 21. We got married quite early, and I wasn't exposed to drugs or alcohol or anything like that growing up. It wasn't a thing I was around, and I met this guy, and we got married, and I had no idea he took drugs. No idea,
Wow.
And so we got married, and things started going downhill about a year and a half into our marriage. Loads of debts, just loads of debts. And then phone calls from places that weren't being paid, medical aid cut off, electricity cut off at home. And then it was just one thing after another, constantly losing jobs, taking my car, leaving me at work and not fetching me, little things. But I stuck through it all, and we had a little girl. And then, it just got worse and worse, was letting us down. Ups and downs, highs and lows, couldn't understand what was going on until we were married for about 4 years. And there was just so much. We had about 800,000 rands worth of debts, borrowing money from my dad, borrowing money from all these people. And it was just, a lot that went on. Chaos.
Yeah.
So, and then he went into recovery, and then, you kind of hold on to that because you go, well, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. Or I wouldn't,
I'm in this position because of you.
And by then, he had a good few months, and I'd fallen pregnant with our second child, my son. And I remember walking into a rehab, 7 months pregnant, to visit my husband, and I was like, this is not how I pictured my
Yeah.
life. You know, like having magnums walking into rehab with my
Yes.
2-year-old.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah.
not like, you know.
Or taking Connor was 18 months the first time he went and visited Chris in treatment center. So like, it's not the life that we,
Yeah.
not the life
Sure.
that we pictured initially.
Here's an ice cream.
Yeah.
Let's go visit Daddy in rehab.
Yeah.
You know, not quite.
Sure.
You know.
That's it, yeah.
So and then just trying to explain those things to a 2.5-year-old,
Yeah.
and then as they get older. And I always used to say this knight in shining armor that I thought I'd married was like just a weird smelly man in tinfoil. But he's not smelly, though. That's just being mean.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So it's just a lot of things, but you hold on to it.
You
for a
hold
long
on to
time.
it, definitely. And I think that's like where I relate to Kerry, is that I also held on to all of these things. I thought that my husband he's been to treatment probably about 11 times on and off over the like first 12 years of our relationship. And each time I had this like feeling that he's going to come back and be fixed and everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But again, come back and I'm actually still in the same place I was when he left for treatment, and now he's trying to get better and I'm actually still sick,
Sure.
essentially. Still wanting to double check everything, still haven't been able to build trust because haven't had a chance to do any of my own healing.
Sure.
And actually we found my husband's addiction took him to live on the streets for about 18 months. We were separated. And during that time, I found a Project Exodus group, and I actually started the journey for myself. I walked into the first group and someone's like, do you think you're codependent? And I'm like, me? How dare you say there's something wrong with me?
I'm
Like,
offended.
I'm actually offended. Like, I'm totally fine.
Yeah,
I'm the
makes
saint
sense.
of this family. I've been holding the family together. But it was a rude awakening, but a good one in that actually there was stuff that I needed to deal with. And, you know, like Kelly and I, we can have similar journeys with our husbands, but obviously we've had completely different upbringings in that both my parents were in addiction. So I grew up in addiction, and I grew up with that chaos and destruction, thinking that it's normal. So when I got into a relationship at 15 with somebody who was definitely in addiction, there was no red flag.
It's just what you do.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
this
it
is
was
normal.
Yeah.
This is normal. So that healing journey that I started because of my husband actually turned out to be a healing journey that I needed from my parents as well.
Yeah.
So it wasn't all everything that I was blaming on him wasn't actually all to do with him.
Right. It wasn't just him. Sure. So what were some of the things that you mentioned? Obviously codependency, which I'm sure we'll unpack that a bit more. But what are some of the things that surprised you, like when you went to a group and things started coming out? Like what surprised you about, like, wow, I did not know this was a thing, or I had these things to forgive, or I had, like, what are some of the stuff that you didn't expect from doing this journey?
I didn't expect that all the times that I thought that I was helping my husband, I was actually enabling him.
Sure.
It's like I wasn't ready for that like feedback that actually I'm contributing to the problem as opposed to fixing the problem, which is in my flawed belief and in my flawed thinking.
Yeah.
And in my codependency, I thought that I was fixing, I was rescuing, I'm this great martyr. And I wasn't ready to actually hear that actually I'm contributing to the problem.
Sure.
Yeah, and I relate to that because you think that you're helping, and you also think you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
You know, I'm doing this because I have to. You know, I have to support him. I have to do the CV for him. I have to stay married to him. I have to do all these things. When actually I'm my own person, I don't have to. So when I was told that, it's actually hard to hear that because you go, you know, but I did have to. You don't understand.
You don't understand. Yes.
I'm different from you. I have to.
I made vows. I made promises. Like all of this stuff adds to this feeling that we have that we're responsible.
Yeah.
And we're actually not.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the freeing things when a supporter or any family and friends or loved ones come into recovery, is that freedom from that level of responsibility that this person is yours to save. Because they're not.
Sure. Just like breaking out of that prison, you know?
Yes, absolutely.
That's awesome. Sure. And then for you, Kelly, like what are some of the stuff that you kind of was surprised by as you were unraveling things and unpacking things for your journey?
Yeah, I think it was I think learning for me, it was a massive thing, is learning about addiction. That was a big thing because for me, it was almost like my husband didn't love us enough.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
if he loved us enough, he'd come home. If he loved us enough, he'd
Stop using.
you know, you'd
Sure.
support us,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah,
provide
yeah,
for us.
yeah.
And, you know, and we'd have these arguments that were just like, I'd think, am I going crazy? You know,
Yeah.
you actually feel like that, you know, in the dysfunction, you feel that there's something wrong with you
Yeah.
Sure.
because it's manipulation and all these things. So you're kind of trying to find out what's real, what's not real, what's right, what's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's just that, that level of dysfunction that you're in, the insanity, and just realizing that, you know, learning about addiction, learning about, you know, what it actually is, what effect it has on the addicted individual,
Yeah.
you know, and then the family member, realizing it's not just you. There's
Yeah.
so many people.
Not alone.
You know, you're not alone. But that there's a place for you. You need your own, you know, and like help. But it's also just, I think, realizing that I was very emotionally reactive.
Yeah.
Because I was constantly waiting
That's
for
a good
something to go wrong.
Mm.
And I was so reactive. I'd lose my temper. I'd shout and scream. I'd call him names. I just wasn't a horrible person.
Yeah.
You know, but I was allowed to
Right.
because of what
Because of what
his
Yeah.
behavior
Yes.
Yeah.
caused me to do this, you know,
Yeah.
and actually, having to take accountability wasn't nice. And it was one of the biggest lessons I'd learned.
You're learning that actually I'm a bit entitled.
Yeah.
When I thought that I was just doing what I was meant
Yeah.
to be doing,
Yeah.
and then to actually be like, actually, I'm not entitled to
Yeah.
treat them the way
know.
that I am.
But
or
you
react
made me
the way-
angry, so I'm allowed to call you a
Yeah.
beep, 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 beeping.
Shut.
But that's the thing, and I think that's where it's so important. Is because when families aren't in recovery, guys that are ladies, individuals that come into recovery to try and turn their life around, if they're going back into the same environment it was when they were using, it's not helpful. So it's not that it's on us to change the environment, but it's my responsibility to work on myself. You know, even parents whose kids were in addiction, that there's work there that has to happen. There's guilt and there's shame and there's maybe I've done something wrong, and you know that it's such a toxic, dysfunctional thing that affects not just the person that's using or acting out or behaving, it affects the whole family.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean they get off with whatever they've done. You know what I mean? Because you have to be like, yeah, everything's fine. Don't upset them because they're in recovery.
Yeah, it's not walking on eggshells.
Yeah, and
It's
they have
different
to
to
take
that.
responsibility and accountability for what
Yes.
they've done.
Yes.
But it's also I am responsible for the environment I bring into my house.
Right.
Yeah.
And by me shouting and screaming and, you know, and also checking if he's at group and being obsessive about, you know, where he's going and digging through his bag like a crazy person.
We do.
Looking for
We would
straws.
make great detectives, though.
So good.
We
Yes.
really would.
Years of experience.
Yes, I
Years
am
of experience.
so good at social media stalking.
Yeah, like I
Nice.
could find someone
Yeah,
that.
so good. And where he's been. And
Yes,
like, you know,
yeah.
someone's friend.
So I
Oh,
mean,
it's
there's
crazy.
skills that are
Yeah.
learned.
Yeah.
There's skills, but it's
Yeah.
about actually we're the unhealthy version of ourselves in those places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
I didn't like if people had to hear how I would speak and react. And
Yeah.
react is the good word. I was so reactive.
Yeah, we weren't. I know I was definitely not the best version of myself in those situations, and
Right.
I think that I would probably still be in that situation if I hadn't come to recovery and I hadn't actually done the work for myself, and not just come to recovery to tick a box, like actually do work on myself. And I think that in order to work, like for me, in order to work on myself, I actually had to give myself permission to put myself first. And I think that's where the codependency comes in, is that everybody is more important than me.
Yeah.
So I'm always trying to fix and solve and micromanage and make sure and control everyone else. And I'm at the bottom of that list. And I think what recovery does, it gave me an opportunity to put myself first for a while, and to work on myself and give myself permission to do that, because it felt like I was doing something wrong to put myself first.
And how did you do that? Like, how did you practically, like, begin to almost, like, shift away from codependency and create your own identity? Like, what were some of the practical things you did to do that?
So I think for me, for codependency, the first thing, even before I started working on what it was and how it looked, is to actually get over the shock that it was something more than just who I was. Because I just believed that I was naturally a caretaker and I naturally felt responsible for people. So to put a name to it, I actually had to get over the denial that this is a thing. and then actively work at it. So actively grow self-awareness, like be open to when am I saying yes when I mean no, and when am I people pleasing? Do I actually want to do this, or am I worried about what people are going to say or think or do? Am I looking for validation in what I'm doing? So because codependency is so multifaceted, just like addiction is, I had to, before I could start working on how to change things, I had to work on being aware that I actually did certain things. So I think that started the journey, and obviously you were reading literature around codependency and understanding codependency more. It's like we were saying, like the more we understand addiction, the more we're able to actually understand what's going on with our loved ones. The same for our own journey. You know, like unpacking what are things like enabling, what are things like the drama triangle, what are things like codependency. Unpacking these concepts help us to identify, actually, I act this way, or I relate to this person. And I think reading other stories that were similar to mine, it gave me that, like what Kelly said, it's like we're not alone. And so that started a journey of being able to work at it in bite-sized pieces along the way. And I mean, it's not, I still love a bit of control, I won't lie. Still got to fight that. Still got to fight the you know, people pleasing and that. But what the journey has given me is it's given me freedom, that I'm not the wife of someone that was in addiction, or I'm not just a child of someone in addiction. That actually recovery and learning about codependency and working myself has meant that I'm actually my own person. And I'm valued and I'm important despite what I do. And I think recovery obviously led me to find Jesus and find a relationship with him and be saved and baptized. So actually what recovery gave me was my identity, which I didn't have before.
Awesome.
And
So
I think that
Yeah.
the truth of that and the action of that has also helped me on the journey of discovering myself,
Very cool.
over and above putting in the work.
And like the thing is that you kind of feel like this kind of thing should be taught when you're teenagers.
Yes.
Of
Be
how
helpful.
to be a functional human being.
Right.
You
Yes.
know, it's like how to not
Yes.
people please, how to
Yes.
not have reactive emotions, how to be an emotionally intelligent person.
Yeah, how do we respond
You
to
know,
those,
and
rather?
that's the funny thing is that people in recovery, whether it's support or recovery or, you know, addiction, you know, dysfunction recovery, are some of the most mature,
Yes,
emotionally
true story.
stable people
Yeah.
I have ever met.
Yeah.
Like, and you go, wow, you're so wise, or so, you know,
Yeah.
cool, or level-headed
Yeah.
most of the time, you know. But like, you're able
Yeah.
to process things, you know, better, and it's kind of helped me teach my kids as well. I use like a lot of the material that we, you know, kind of learn.
Yes, it
and
helps with parenting.
it's like life
Sure.
stuff,
Very
actually.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
Sure.
not just recovery stuff. And I wish, I mean, 11 years ago, when I didn't have people to talk to, I kind of Googled and I'd have chats online with people or whatever. But, and then the meetings we had, where there were meetings, it wasn't the group that we have now, this like group environment where you're actually with people in addiction or in recovery from addiction, as well as supporters, kind of in the same room, and
Yes,
then
you get that
split off and you
perspective, yeah.
get both, you
Yes.
know. That is just like priceless. I don't think you can actually put you know, the amount people say, I came out of there and I understand my daughter better, or I
Yes.
understand my son better. And you go in there, almost every supporter that comes to our group goes, hi, I'm so-and-so and I'm here to support this person. And then you say, okay, well, just give it a few weeks and they'll go, I'm here to in recovery from, you know,
Yes.
codependency, enabling,
Yes,
you know, and
it's
then
beautiful.
it turns from I'm here for this person,
Yeah.
Yes.
which is what our life has been like,
Yeah.
to I'm here actually for me.
Wow.
So that's cool.
So
And
cool.
I mean, you just reminded me of something. Like often in group, I'll say, like in the supporters group, I'm like, we come to group because of our loved ones, but we actually stay for ourselves. Because
Wow.
the true beauty of a supporter's testimony as well, and in their journey, is that despite where our loved ones are in their journey, we can still be strong in our own journey. So you'll have family that their loved ones will go off the rails or relapse, but they are still there. They're still in the groups and they're still working on themselves.
Sure.
And that just speaks what you were saying about wishing that you had that before. It speaks to that like culture of recovery as well. It's like not just our loved ones that in that culture, we create that whole culture of recovery within our family environments, with our kids. Like they all benefit from that culture, and we almost live in a culture of recovery with our work, with our groups, with our families.
Yeah, and it's the same as like if you drop a stone in water and the ripples, you know.
Yes.
If in addiction, it's the same. The ripples affect so many people.
Yeah.
But in recovery, it's the same.
It's the
You
same.
know, when you're
Beautiful.
in this, you know, culture of recovery, there's something just so, inviting about having this just really cool, non-judgmental environments where people are
Yes.
just growing and changing all the time, and it's really just spreads.
It's
some kind
life-giving.
of way. Yeah,
So
it is.
cool.
Yeah,
It's definitely
freedom,
life.
man.
Yeah,
That's why we
freedom.
call it freedom
Yeah.
in recovery. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So can you both give me an example of a space where you're free, like if you had to look back at, you know, however long ago to now, like something that you do, maybe like it's like an example of something you've done where it's like it demonstrates the fact that you're now free, you know, like I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
makes sense.
yeah.
I think for me, it's trust. Trust with my husband. Like in early days and for the first 12 years of our relationship, I don't think that there was trust. I think that I was in charge, and I made sure that everything was taken care of, and I couldn't trust him with finances, with my emotions, with our kids. And I think that the one thing that stands out for me in my journey of recovery is that I've put in the work and he's put in the work, and now I do have that trust. I have that trust that he's going to, you know, he provides for us and he takes care of us. I have that trust that I can completely fall apart emotionally or physically, and I don't have to fear that it will trigger him off. I don't have to fear that I'm going to say the wrong thing and set him off. Like I have freedom to say what I want to say, to be who I want to be, and to fall apart if I need to. And I think that trust is so critical in that's definitely one thing that we don't have when our loved ones are in addiction, or when we caught up in the chaos of addiction. So I think that recovery has given me the opportunity to learn how to trust, and through obviously a relationship with God, and that I'm able to trust in greater plans for our lives. But I think that recovery has given me the opportunity to allow myself to trust.
Wow, that's awesome. And how long do you think that took to get that trust rebuilt?
It took a while. I think something happened around, my husband is almost 6, next year he'll be 6 years in recovery, so it's about 5.5 years in recovery. And I think something happened around the 2.5 year mark, where there was just like a natural shift. It wasn't something that we were both intentional about. And I think that shift has been gradual over the last two and a bit years. And it's something that's flowed organically. Hasn't been something that we've been intentional about. And I think that just speaks to the maturity and recovery.
It's not forced.
That it's not forced. You know, everything in the chaos of addiction always feels forced.
Right.
Forced to do things, forced to get clean,
Yeah,
forced
yeah.
to behave. And I think that it's given us this organic growth in our relationship with each other, in our relationship as parents. But I definitely can say that around the 2.5 year mark, there was like a significant shift.
Sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then how about for you, Kelly?
Oh, there's a good few things. I think firstly, my how I see other people in addiction and all that kind of thing, my perspective of it being
So
like
good.
these dirty homeless people that live under
Yeah.
bridges, you know, with one shoe. I don't know why I always picture them with one shoe on. Shame. Sold the other shoe for drugs,
Yes.
maybe, or something. I don't
Hey,
know.
I mean, that happens.
Yeah, I
That
know.
happens. Chris sold a pair of shoes off his feet. So, I mean, it happens.
I'm telling you. But yeah, and that you don't, you know that there are people, you know, they're now gotten into this position where they don't want to, no one wants
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
in this place.
That's
And
good.
it's so easy to go, well, you've done this to yourself, you know, and
Yeah.
so it's given me that getting off my pedestal of
Yes.
like
Right.
thinking
Yeah,
that
that's
I'm
good.
better than them. So that's been a big one for me. And then control, letting go of control. I mean, even when my husband was early into recovery, someone said to me, we had this WhatsApp group, and it was for supporters and stuff, and someone put on there, my son is being, you know, really difficult, and he's being really mean and all that. And then I said, I said to him, well, when my husband acts like that, I make him do step work. And I think back to that, and I'm like, what? Okay, so I was about 24 at the time, so like give me a break. But yeah, like 26 or something. But it was just like I control his recovery.
Yes.
He's
'Cause
better.
I can do it better
yeah,
than him.
because I can do it better than
I
him.
can do
You're
it
not
better
doing
than
it
him.
enough. Put more effort in, like that, and it's so embarrassing to think back to those things. But
the things we did.
yeah,
Yeah.
because they were all relied on us,
Yeah.
and I think that letting go of that control
Yeah.
has been a huge thing. Like, and also just like realizing if my husband was going to relapse, there's nothing I can do or say
Yeah.
that'll stop him.
Yeah.
Sure.
I have no control
Just
over
releasing,
it.
yeah.
And
Yeah, that's good.
I can't,
Mm.
rely on me making sure he's okay, make sure I watch every cent he spends, making sure that we follow or track him, keep him in the house,
Yeah.
check that he doesn't have, I don't know, like lemon poppy seed muffins or whatever it
Yes.
is that where I'm
Yeah,
obsessed, you become so obsessive.
Yeah.
And that's our cycle of dysfunction, that
Yes,
obsession.
that obsession. Yeah. So
Whereas
good.
someone, in addiction has that obsession for their drug of choice. Ours is obsession for this person. You
Yeah.
know,
It's like they're our
Sure.
drug of
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah.
they become
Sure.
like
They
yeah.
become
Wow.
our
Yeah,
like
yeah.
our person
Yeah.
of choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're obsessed
Yeah.
with making sure everything's okay. So I think
Sure.
letting go of that, realizing
Yeah,
that you're
that's
doing that
good.
in the first
So
place,
good.
and then having to let go, then helps me let go of a lot of other things in life where I go, well, I actually can't control the outcome of this. I actually can't. And I think it's that journey
Yeah.
of learning I can't control him and my situation, which
Yeah.
has helped me learn I can't control a lot of things, and a lot of things
Yeah.
I have to leave to God, and I
And
have to
just,
let
like,
go.
hands off, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's so good.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much just for sharing from your own journey, and just, I think, sharing about how you found freedom, from
Yeah.
through recovery and from your lives and your journeys. So
Yeah, awesome.
yeah.
Thank you for having us. If more people could, the supporters could come, it would
Yes.
change so
Mm.
many lives. And
Yeah.
it's
for
just,
sure. Yeah.
just to get the message out there that they must come too. They're welcome. People, in support, like supporters are welcome and
Yes.
wanted.
And there's a space.
there's a place for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, eh?
Yeah, and thank you for you guys for tuning in for today's session. So if you want to know more about Project Exodus, be sure to go on the website www.projectexodus.net, and if you want to get involved in group, you can contact us, and also please share this podcast with someone, with maybe a family member or friend or someone
Yeah.
you think will benefit from this conversation. Be sure to send this podcast to them, and we'll see you next week.